and welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We certainly have a perspective or two this morning with our guest. We're very happy to have this gentleman with us, and I'm going to have Judy Kay introduce him. I have to let her do something, you know, she owns 51% of the show.
And I whine.
Kudos. It seemed to me, we've always tried to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two. Yeah, and it just seems to me that it would be appropriate today to say something about the boys in blue on the street. They're getting maligned so much.
Oh my.
Coast to coast and border to border, and this country has gone ape. And I think it's just time to acknowledge that we've got some boys out there on the line, and they are literally on the line. So to our police and our first responders, a tip of the hat.
Proof positive that things change. Bill and I being golden agers, don't you know? Yes, we go back a few years, and you know, there was a time, you young people, where policemen were highly respected, and rightly so. But that's not in vogue anymore. And of course, there are a few who aren't so hot, you know? Just like there are a few shoe salesmen who aren't so hot.
Or
whatever.
Or radio announcers.
Or radio announcers.
All right, let's get on this. This gentleman has given his time today, and let's get him on the air because he has some important things that.
Well, I guess, and he's a busy fellow, and he's got busy people working with him. Kent Froebe is the superintendent of Lincoln Elementary School District 27.
Big, handsome dude.
Yeah, big bone boy.
That's for sure. But well, thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to join both of you.
You've had a busy time, haven't you?
Well, yes, without question, starting, I think, was it March 16th?
Yes.
When they decided to shut things down. A lot of sleepless nights, that's for sure.
Oh, my, yes.
You must have felt like Tom Paine did long ago. These really are times that try your soul. And that's the truth today.
Without a doubt. I mean, I would get knots in my shoulders and I couldn't convince my wife to rub them out for me. So, I mean, it was just, it's one of those deals where
well, you'll have to work on your sales techniques.
Right, exactly. But, it was one of those deals where when due to COVID-19, when they decided to shut schools down, it really was fly by the seat of our pants, and I felt like our faculty and staff just stepped up and did an amazing job. And you know, starting with our technology department with Barb Coffey and Kim Skelton of we distributed 1,000 devices, just over 1,000 devices to our pre-K through 8th grade students, and to organize that pickup day for that.
Oh my!
And the parents were great too. The flexibility that the parent and the understanding that the parents displayed. I don't always see that in education, but they really stepped up to the plate as well. And did a nice job with making sure that they picked up the devices, trying to get their students, you know, to log in and participate in the Zoom meetings, or you know, to continue that educational process was definitely a challenge.
And all that is so reassuring for the people generally. However, there's no guarantee that you won't have to pick up all your toys and do it again.
And that's what we're planning for.
Come September, what does it look like, Mr. Froebe? The status quo insofar as...
Well, that's what we...
you don't know yet, do you?
Well, we received a 63-page document that I have here in my hand that it's going to be a matter of a few weeks of really diving into that, and I have developed a reentry team where it's going to be administrators, and I have a teacher from each of our school buildings, you know, all 5 of them, and our nurse, and I've got a board member who kind of wears 3 hats, you know, Ryan Williams, Wilbur's grandson.
Is that right?
He's going to serve on the committee, and he works at the health department as well, and is a parent. So he, like I said, he's kind of serves multiple hats for us on the committee, and so it'll be just a matter of diving in and trying to figure out what is best for our students. And you know, I'm hoping that the state will allow some flexibility, you know, to have some local control to determine. You know, Logan County has 14 cases to date. compared to, and it's going to look maybe a little different than what the suburbs look like. I would
my.
hope. And that's the hope that superintendents across the state have, that there is some flexibility for some local control to kind of determine what's best for our region.
Does it look like they'll be giving you some latitude, or you'll be having any input?
I believe that that's going to be the case, that everything that they come out with, that they're strictly saying is guidance, that it's not set in stone.
Mandatory.
Not a mandatory thing, but I mean, just some of the highlights of what is in this 63-page joint guidance, they call it, because it's with the State Board of Education and the Illinois Health Department. They kind of came together and formed this, but it's looking like they're going to require face masks, which is kind of a hard pill to swallow, to think about elementary kids all day in a face mask.
That's going to be very difficult.
Yeah,
I think.
I would think so too. I mean, it's something that we obviously need to encourage from the start, that if that does help stop the spread, that we're going to encourage it. But to think of an elementary student all day long in a face mask, we'll need to, as a committee, try to figure out, okay, when they go out for recess, which is going to be allowed, they have them take them off, and come up with different scenarios of when they can remove their face mask and are socially distanced enough that they don't need them on at all times.
Theoretically, they should be acquainted with the principle, because kids from 2 years old, I can't imagine trying to manage that as a mother, thank you very much, are supposed to be wearing them.
That's correct. And in theory, it sounds good, but if you've ever been in a school or been an educator, or then that's going to be quite difficult. And
we were in school back in the dark ages, weren't we, Bill? Didn't have any masks
Yeah, I was
then.
reading, writing, and arithmetic.
What are you going to do about this no more than 50 people? That'll be okay for a classroom, but there are school districts who have buses, and I went to school in a town that was a little bit bigger than Lincoln, and there were every bit of 50 kids on a school bus.
Well, busing is a whole nother animal that luckily I don't have to deal with.
Yes. You should say thank you, God, for that.
I do it regularly.
Yes.
But I know that, take example, Olympia.
Yes.
They're busing kids from Hopedale, and there are many different communities to a location, to a school, and they're full. That will be a challenge for them, and so that creativity is going to have to come to play with all of our committees of how are we doing this? Are we staggering? Are we going to have another bus go? I mean, two buses picking up children in Hopedale and stuff. That it's just going to have to be completely different than what we're used to in the norm.
How about like PE classes where you have more than just a classroom full of kids?
PE is another one that's very PE and band and art. Some of your we're very proud of our STEM class, and those are all collaborative, hands-on, constructing, and those will be very challenging. PE will be a lot of one that's nice out, just running and walking around the track type thing, because they really don't want us sharing a lot of. And that's pretty clear that you should not be sharing of equipment, and so we'll have to create games that or different scenarios, activities where they're using their own equipment, or elementary is a little bit easier for PE, because I've never seen kids so excited just to learn to skip or hop or do
Yeah.
So
I could teach that.
Took me maybe a little while longer than the average bear walking the woods out there, but I really believe that this virus thing is a real serious problem, not only for us here but for the world. And it doesn't bother me to wear a mask anywhere. I keep one in the car, and if I'm going into a store, that mask will go on. I just think it's a very, very serious problem for this entire world, and nobody knows
when the
day to
vaccine
day.
is, when they're going to have a vaccine or antibiotics, or how it is very serious. Bill, I agree with you 100%. And I mean, there's a neighboring school district that some parents got together and decided to have their own prom, and come to find out 10 of the students who attended the makeshift prom is now testing positive.
Parents are well-intended,
Yeah.
but
they just didn't
there's a
think
real
they-
world we have to work with.
Yeah, there's reasons that school
Yeah.
districts canceled
Yeah.
prom and graduation, and I mean,
I remember hearing my father talk about the flu epidemic in his time, 18, 19, and he was living in Chicago right out of high school, working for F.W. Woolworth Company, and he and his roommate, a fellow from Lincoln by the name of Jack Devaney, they roomed together. They each had separate jobs. And they nursed one. They each got the doggone stuff. And
Spanish.
they nursed
You're talking the Spanish flu, yeah.
And they nursed one another through it. A quick aside, if I may.
no, absolutely.
Jack Devaney was a traveler. I mean, he was a salesman. And when my dad died in 1950, Jack Devaney heard about it, and he got on an airplane and came back to Lincoln, Illinois, for my dad's services. Got on a plane the next day and went back to Seattle, Washington. I'll never forget that. That's something that's really ingrained in you. Now, you talk about, there's an old song about friendship,
Yes.
just a perfect blendship. Their friendship, he forgot, ours will still be hot.
Yep.
Well, man, getting on an airplane in those days was in 1950.
Big deal.
That was a big deal. And I always remember that. I wish you had family around here so I could pick up the phone and call them once in a while. They're all gone now. Anyway, Kent, your Illinois Education Association, I presume you're getting tons of stuff from their offices and so forth that is supposed to be, and I emphasize supposed to be of help to the administrators.
Yes, and
But
then,
the thing of it is, nobody knows for sure.
right, that's where this guidance
That's the
just came
catcher.
out, and
That's
that's where, I mean, it's going to take us a few weeks to really dive into this and figure out what, but then, no one knows for sure if, how are we going to handle it if a student does contract it, and so we'll be leaning towards, or leaning on the health department and the hospital,
Yes,
and maybe
yes.
forming a collaborative team there to come up with some procedures of, if there is a so-called second wave that comes through where people are concerned. My fear is, my ultimate fear is that we'll have to shut down again. I hope that we don't get to that point, but I think that we'll be better prepared for if there is a shutdown, of how remote instruction looks. But having 4 kids of my own at home, it was very challenging. I mean, very challenging. And they range from second grade all the way up to college, and I mean, it's
And there's an economic factor involved there too, for particularly for many families who may have a little economic problem. Suddenly, Johnny and Jane are home, and somebody's got to stay at home, and they can't go to work.
Yes.
without a doubt.
And that's a snowball that just keeps compounding.
That also factors in with the one staying at home with my kids is an actual teacher, and she was still at times struggling with helping them. And so you can imagine
and
the
she had
parents.
professional background.
Correct. Yeah. So I mean, it is. Those are all things that us as educators have to take into consideration. That empathy piece of, hey, these kids, many of them have more on their plate than trying to log into our class at home and figure this out. You know.
Well, and some parents will not be motivated to help a little kid. Others will not be able to help a little kid. And times have changed dramatically. You know, when Bill and I had little kids, a lot of mothers were at home, and there aren't many at home anymore.
Many are working.
That picture has changed. What about this health testing? They claim that they're going to test the kids to be sure that Johnny or Mary don't have it.
That is something, that's one of the requirements is that, they'll conduct symptom screenings, they're called. And so more or less it's using the surface thermometer,
Right.
Test the forehead and see. They're wanting schools to do that for everybody that steps foot in the building. They're giving some leeway to allow parents to test them and be certain, take claim that they're okay coming from home. So, we'll just have to figure out what's going to work best for us. I know the surface thermometers, we have purchased a number of those, but how accurate are they? We've tested you hold a cup of coffee, and right now both of you would probably test as, having a fever, where, I've seen where we've just played around with a little bit in the district office, and some of the staff, I'm surprised they have a pulse as cold as it's reading them. So how accurate are they is kind of the question that I have, So.
And you can't ask a second grader whether they've been having a problem with wheezing or anything, they don't know.
Well, and Judy, come November, that's flu season anyway. So how it's going to be very tricky with what, and the bottom line is, if you're sick, we need parents to keep them at home. And I know that can be a hardship, and like you just talked about, working families, but if they are displaying any kind of symptom for any illness, they're just going to have to stay home, and that's okay. We encourage that. Long gone are the perfect attendance days of, you're coming to school ill so you can get that perfect attendance.
Yes.
We need people to be cognizant of if they are wheezing, if they are coughing, or showing signs of a fever, then they must stay home so that it doesn't spread.
And how are you going to make rules that cover downtown Chicago and Emden?
That's a good question. That's why we're hoping for local control, so that Mr. Wisniewski, the superintendent of Hartsburg-Emden, can come up with what works for his schools and his communities compared to what works for Joliet.
Yeah.
So
you got a whole different ballgame, and it sounds to me like the bottom line is going to include a lot having to do with the almighty dollar.
That's good that you brought that up.
That ought to ruin you.
Economic times are a strain, as you are well aware of, and so a lot of these things are not free. So devices, a lot of districts are struggling with coming up with funds to how to provide devices for each student. Connectivity, that was a big push. We were able to, and kudos to our tech department, to purchase 35 hotspots for our we had 35 families that weren't able to connect, so we were able to provide them with hotspots to be able to log into the internet.
Sure.
And we'll have to plan and be ready for that again in the fall. If heaven forbid we do have to go back to that remote learning, then we'll have those ready as well. But there's just a lot a lot of planning that's going into it. That
administrators in their school districts, I started to say, and particularly in the small school district, but I don't think that's germane at all. But it must be like a juggler, circus juggler, throwing a lot of balls in the air and making sure we don't drop one as it goes through the cycle. You gentlemen and ladies out there in our school system, you're like a left fielder, and the guy hit it to right. You're scrambling over to get to the right field, to pick up the ball.
Well, there's a reason that we go into education. We love working with kids.
That's pretty obvious.
But times like this, Bill, I wish I would have just gone into farming.
I can accept that. I think we should think about also if we don't, we may not be into broadcasting if we don't recognize our sponsors. So we'll let Mr. Ash go right ahead with our commercials. Go right ahead, James. Right back live in the studio here at WLCN 96.3 on your FM dial. Again, each Wednesday morning, your program is a Viewpoint, wherein we try to bring people who know what the heck's going on in the community and other entertaining features. In any event, if there are any.
Nice work, bud.
We've been we've been blessed this morning to have a gentleman whom I respect, and Judith Kay does too, very much, Mr. Kent Froebe, District 27 Superintendent, and I know a little bit about that since I worked on the 27 board for a long time with Mr. Plotner, who was, by the way, one of our best able administrators we've had down through the pike. Mr. Froebe's got and all administrators have a really difficult job today in this COVID-19 situation the world over, trying to educate your youngsters in what would be termed a normal fashion. The word normal is going out the window, and so we have a new norm, as the saying goes. What is your most important problem that when you go into the office tomorrow morning, what will be the most important thing that will be on your mind, Mr. Froebe?
Well, the most important thing will be getting this committee together and start really figuring out a plan to then make sure that we're able to communicate that with the community. I know that there's a lot of families and parents who have questions, and I get texts regularly from parents and phone calls that, are we going to be starting? And they're just trying to make plans themselves, for daycare, like you mentioned. So the most important thing is we received this document last night at 4 o'clock, and I had a chance to skim it, but I really need to dive deeper into it. Our Reentry Committee is meeting on Monday, and then we'll just have to set up meetings. We'll be looking to survey the community and our parents here early next week, and so we'll have questions of ranging from their feelings of starting back to school, because I'm sure we will. I would say in Logan County, a majority of families are ready to get their kids back to school, but we still might have a few that don't feel comfortable sending their kid to school. And so then how does that look if that child stays at home and we have a majority of our kids in school, and then teachers are still expected to reach those students that are at home and deciding to stay at home for remote learning.
But another avenue that comes from public education that I think we kind of overlook sometimes is that when your kid goes to school, they have to learn to get along with the kid who sits behind them and in front of them, and the leader of the pack who sits at the desk that faces them in front. There's a lot going on in school that doesn't have to do with book learning.
That social aspect is a critical part of a child's education, absolutely. But I fear that we will have some parents that, fear might be the wrong word, but we will have some parents who just don't feel comfortable yet this year sending them back because of the health concerns that they have for their individual child.
Yeah, it's an ever-present specter out there on the horizon. The kind of a question mark is, what's right?
Right, correct.
And Mr. Froebe paid tribute to his staff at the beginning of our show this morning, which is nice to know. Didn't surprise me any at all. How well they have cooperated and worked hard to work around these circumstances that we now found ourselves in. And I know, for instance, at Lincoln College, Dr. Gerlach has a wonderful staff up there, and their challenges are somewhat different than a public school system. But there again, we get down to, it becomes the almighty dollar, economics. And
we did receive a little bit through the CARES Act.
Oh, is that
and
right?
So yep. And
I don't think any of us knew that.
Yep. Yeah. So the CARES is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, and you maybe heard that passed through the federal government. District 27 did receive some dollars from that.
Did that help offset these devices?
That helped offset some of the devices. We were able to purchase face masks for every student and every adult. We were able to purchase thermometers with them. Obviously, cleaning the building is going to be huge, and making sure that the building is disinfected regularly will be another
ongoing cost.
And right now it's a challenge to find, the disinfectant. Everything's on back order, with this pandemic, and so.
Yeah, I decided we better have a thermometer in our house. For some reason, I threw away a rectal thermometer a long time ago.
I bet you're glad.
So I decided we ought to have a thermometer now. Well, you can't find one anywhere.
Oh, dear heaven, no stuff.
Well, I thought Gene was a little rough using it the last time.
Do you see what I have to put up with in my staff?
Well, when you close the door at night and go home, you kind of feel frustrated, Mr. Froebe, that maybe you didn't get something done that you had hoped to get done that day because of all this that's going on.
I think that, and frustrated would probably be the wrong word. Another big challenge and something that we're constantly thinking about is how do we close that gap, that educational gap for the children who missed out. You know, we did our best to provide curriculum and instruction during that shutdown, but I mean, they missed 2.5 months of face-to-face schooling, that in-person schooling, which is so critical to a student's development. So it's the other thing that we're working on is how do we bridge that gap? How do we and the main, we really need to focus on language arts and math. Not to say that science and social studies and the other, you know, that's not important, but we've got to make sure that the kids can read and write and
I think the cat
We're
hit a
back on
button.
air?
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, the cat hit.
Back on air.
Ouch. She didn't like what I was saying, did she?
Quote Shakespeare, out damn spot.
These the situation where you're working with a lot of youngsters who cannot begin to comprehend what this is all about, and their lives are changed upside down. And that is another factor that teachers in the elementary system have to contend with, and perhaps somebody in the secondary system doesn't have that worry. Am I correct in that?
Well, yes, and so a range of educating them on how to, you know, proper hygiene is important, all the way to ensuring, like I think what you were leaning toward or heading towards was making sure that we have some, you know, mental health personnel on staff to be able to work with the students. It's hard telling what some of our students unfortunately maybe had to go through during that long extended shutdown. I mean, they've been shut down by the time we received them back in August. It'll have been, you know, nearly 6 months since we've seen that child, and not everybody goes home to a loving home, and so
Important point.
it's important that we have counselor. You know, we have a really good elementary counselor and a new good junior high counselor, and then we also we have a Mosaic program which helps provide additional counseling, and that's actually funded through the foundation board at the hospital. And I tell you what, and I know I plugged them before, but the hospital here, ALMH, they have really stepped up for the community, and that's another program that will play critical when we receive students back is that Mosaic program with additional counseling services for our students that are returning. So
I haven't talked lately to any teachers here in Lincoln, but my friend's son teaches in Denver, and he came to visit his mom. And he'd given all his students his cell phone number while he was out of town, so that if they had a problem with their studies, they could call him. And 5 did respond in that manner. But I'm sure that these teachers are all going the extra mile to try to keep their kids in touch with the whole thing. Do you talk to any of the higher education people? Are people thinking, who always thought they'd like to be a teacher someday, thinking maybe not?
you know, that's a real concern that we have is the teacher shortage. And I was just telling Mr. Ash that we only had 2 applicants for elementary PE. You know,
Ouchie.
and, that's a position that typically you'd get 40 to 50 applicants.
Really?
We're seeing, you know, for a kindergarten position, maybe only 4 or 5. For junior high science, we had 1. I mean, so Yeah, it's just special ed. We need special ed teachers for sure. We've got
I'm sure.
we've got no applicants for a special ed position at Central currently, and so that's the teacher shortage. I guess what I'm getting at is a real thing, and encouraging kids to go into education is definitely at the forefront of our of administrators' minds. Recruiting. I think it was 2 years ago was the first time I ever had to go to a job fair, because we used to just get so many good applicants that we never even had to. But we, some administrators and I, the principals and I, we went over to Eastern to a job fair. We went to Illinois State to a job fair to try to recruit, applicants to apply in Lincoln, Illinois, and that's just something that hasn't had to be done for many, many years.
Yes.
And so the teacher shortage is a real thing.
Well, I can understand where they're coming from. If you were 18 years old, and you might think I'll pump gas instead.
It's very few of them can go into farming, as Mr. Froebe said earlier this morning. Getting into that is a major economic step. I just lost that thought.
One other thing, Bill, and that I'd like to touch upon.
Yes, please.
Our food service department, our food service director, Connie Crawley, and the all of the cooks, and then we've had volunteers. Mr. Ash's son has even stepped up and helped drive. We provided daily a breakfast and lunch continuously, even during the shutdown, to where at one point we were serving 650 to 700 kids where they would pick it up.
That's a massive number, sir.
Yes, it was great. Like I said, Connie did an excellent job with organizing it all. The cooks stepped up. We had people helping transport it. We had pickup locations at Washington Monroe, Northwest Elementary, and Central. And the parents would drive up, let us know how many kids they had with them, and then we would give them a meal. And that was something that...
Sadly, the bottom line is, and I emphasize that word sadly, the bottom line is that's the only nourishment some of those kids are going to get.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so it becomes vitally important to them to have that service available.
Did a lot of districts do a program such as that?
Many districts did, during the shutdown they did. One good thing about District 27 is that we continued it into the summer, and I've talked about it before, where the last 4 or 5 years we've done a free summer meals program in the summertime, and so we're still handing out about 450 meals a day currently. Now it's dropped off a little bit, now now that it's summertime, but we're still providing lunches. Like Bill said, that's sometimes the only real meal that they're getting besides snack food at home, or and so being able to provide that hot meal for the kids is critical.
So you're doing more than just educating in the sense of that word education. You're providing another very, very important service for the children in our community.
Pardon my being so mercenary, but somebody has to buy those groceries.
Yes.
Where does that come from?
So there is the program that we were able to do this through was federally funded. So it does work out where we are reimbursed for the work and for the groceries, as you put it, the food that we purchased.
As an educator, you're sure into a lot of fields, aren't you?
It seems that way at times. Yeah, it is, and it can be very rewarding yet very challenging, at the same time. But
right now, challenging is at the top of the list, I should suspect.
Right now, challenging is definitely at the top of it, for sure.
Bureaucracy seems to be an impolite word used today. Do you run into much frustration insofar as bureaucracy is concerned, Mr. Froebe? We have some self-important people out there,
Right, and I mean, I guess you could say that at times it appears that way, but I just continue to try to stay focused on helping the kids and doing what's best for them, and with every means that I have available to me. Some of that is out of my control. And so I just do with everything that's afforded to District 27. I try to help the kids and families as much as possible. So,
is there some outfit that steps up to the plate and helps you with discovering these various programs that will help offset the expense of this and that and the other thing, especially now that the whole world's gone wacko and there's a need for a whole bunch of new programs?
Right. Well, right now, the ROE, we are a part of a regional office of education, and they service Livingston, McLean, and Logan. And Mark Jontry is the regional superintendent. He's been very supportive, having regular, Logan County meetings, with the superintendents of Logan County. But we rely heavily on them for guidance and some advice. So they've been instrumental in that. And so
do we still have a position known as county superintendent of schools, per se?
Not so per se.
I'm not aware of any at all.
The regional office used to be in Logan County.
That was a regional office.
It moved.
They closed that office down. So and then we were absorbed with McLean County. So. But I'm excited to move into phase 4 because that means our playgrounds are opened. So they've been closed. We've tried to, put caution tape up, but then we have parents that will tear it down, and let their kids. For once, I'll drive by a playground and see kids playing on it and think, okay, they are allowed to be playing on there.
Yeah.
So that'll be good. But there was some confusion, I think, when the mayor opened up city parks, that then the school's playgrounds. Well, we still are under the guise of the ISBE, and they were mandating that playgrounds stay closed. But that was a challenge keeping them closed, because the community kept tearing down our
kids being what they are.
Yeah. And that was one of the toughest. The night that I had to close down the basketball court when there was 10 kids just playing pickup basketball in Lincoln. That was a challenging and frustrating night for me. Difficult. I should say, not so much challenging, but a difficult.
How about you went where you feel like the Grinch that stole Christmas, for God's sake?
Yes.
I told them they could play one more game, and then I roped it off, and that was definitely.
That's it.
It's one of those things where you love to see kids, out getting exercise and in a productive, in a good way, and it was just, it is what it is, it was one of those things where, the unknowns of this pandemic are just so, such a
little thing. Kids playing basketball, pickup game basketball, and it's not supposed to be. Speaking of basketball. Let's give you a couple seconds here to close off. You've got some athletes in the Froebe family. Let's talk about that just a little bit. You've had some young folks here that have acquitted themselves very well.
Well, and that's what
I tip my hat to you, Dad.
I appreciate that, and I publicly should say that I'm very proud of them. I'm probably too hard on them at home when closed doors, they'd tell you, but I am very proud of I've got a daughter playing Division II at McKendree, and then my son's going to be going to the same conference to play for Missouri S&T, and so Division II basketball, and then my youngest daughter has won 6 or 7 state titles at the IESA level, and so she's and then I've got a second grader who he loves it just as much as I think he has no choice to love it. So,
well, he probably from the day he was born thought this is how we're supposed to be.
This is all he really knows.
Sure.
So when they shut that down and canceled right before our sectional championship game, that was a very difficult.
Yes.
Week or so at the Froebe household for sure. So
I can see you explaining that to the big kids, but how do you explain that to a second grader?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. Explaining it to a senior was very difficult. And so it was-
because their mindset is different, and this is what, boy, we worked through it. Now we're going to the next step. Well, the next step, somebody shut the door in their face.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
and that was that way for athletes from college all the way down. I mean, it was a very difficult time, and I mean, I am thankful that he got to play a majority of his senior year, but where baseball players, that if they only play baseball, they lost their senior year of baseball, and that's, to me, is devastating. So
Well, Dad, I hope it works out for you like it did for a friend of mine. He had one boy had a full ride at the University of Illinois on a basketball scholarship, and another son had a full ride at the University of Missouri on a football scholarship. So those full rides, they amount to a little bit of money. So I hope that will work out for you, Mr. Froebe. Kent Froebe, District 27 Superintendent here, District 27, Elementary District 27. Got a lot of, he's a juggler as well as an administrator. A lot of balls bouncing around off there, and some of them are a little heavy. Appreciate your time, Kent.
I appreciate it. It always goes by fast. I can't believe it's over. So I appreciate you having me on, and like I've told you before, anytime you need a guest, I'd be happy to come and talk education or bring people from the district and dive into some important topics.
As this school year develops, I think Judith and I would like to have you back. You've always been very gracious about your time, and we thank you for that. All right, Mr. Ash, you may flip the off switch.